The City of San Diego granted 3,200 acre-feet of Lake Hodges water annually to the San Diego Irrigation District, joining the San Diego County Water Authority in 19. Special joint meeting of the Encinitas City Council and Parks and Recreation Commission for Wednesday, September 25th, 2024 at 4 p.m. And if the clerk would please call the roll.
Absolutely. I'll start with City Council. Councilmember Lyons.
Here.
Councilmember Ehlers.
Here.
Councilmember Hensy is absent. Deputy Mayor Blackwell.
Here.
And Mayor Kranz.
Here.
And then I'll go to the Park and Recreation Commission. Chair Ritter.
Here.
Vice Chair Hansen.
Here.
Commissioner Capiello. Is Commissioner, no, okay, it's absent. Commissioner Kamarat.
Here.
Commissioner Evers. Here. Commissioner Quinn.
Here.
And then Commissioner Vander Auer. Here. All right, the record will show that all members of the city council are present with the exception of Councilmember Hensy, and all members of the Park and Recreation Commission are present with the exception of Councilmember Capiello.
Okay, thank you. And as you just probably noticed from roll call, we've got commissioners here who, when they are interested in speaking, can raise their hand, and then we'll have you come up to the podium. The chair of the commission, Ross Ritter, is over there, and then we've got Parks and Rec staff and planning staff here, and I appreciate everybody accommodating this special meeting here. It is for the purpose of providing the Parks and Rec Commission adding to their work plan the goal of recommending a name and possible future uses for the city land located at the northeast corner of Highway 101 and La Costa Avenue, formerly and more commonly known as Surfers Point. And to kick off this meeting, we're going to have a presentation from the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Arts, Dave Knopp.
Thank you. Let's see how I do on the button. Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor Kranz, Deputy Mayor Blackwell, members of the City Council. Good evening to the members of the Park and Recreation Commission. Good to see everybody. My name is Dave Knopp. I am the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Arts Department. I'm here this evening with Anna Colamusi, who is Assistant Director of the Development Services, and David Norgard, who is the Parks Operations Manager. Also in the back is Teresa McBroom, Director of Finance. We wanted to start this joint meeting with a short presentation on the city land that is the focus of tonight's meeting. On August 9th, 2023, City Council approved the purchase of 1.43 acres located at the northeast corner of Highway 101 and La Costa Avenue for $6 million. The property has had many uses and has been called by a few different names over the years. This includes Hippie Hill and most recently Surfers Point for the potential development that was planned for the property. I do want to point out on this map there is a city property line, and the black line, that is the line between Encinitas and Carlsbad. And then we have some historic photos in the next 3 slides, and thank you from the mayor for providing the photos. Much of the property is disturbed land, which has had buildings on it. This photo from 1968 shows you the size of the city land in relation to the Bataquitas Lagoon and other land and projects around in the past. The parcel we're talking about is right there. If you can see my circle. Okay. In the left photo, the property is across the street from what is now the State Beach parking. In the second photo to the right, you can see the cottages up on the city property, now owned property from La Costa Avenue. And once again, thanks for the photos. I'm going to play a video here, and this is thanks to the fire department and IT departments for helping us with the video and some of the photos. So let me get you. Sorry, no music. And can we lose it there? Oops. Okay, how do I, sorry, stop it. Okay. Other view of that property here, coming from the south. The sand egg fence is along the property line. You would have seen that in the video also. That's a project that's going on. It'll be mentioned in just a moment. But our 1.43 acres is shown here from the north side, not the south side, sorry. And then here from La Costa Avenue, boulders were added to prevent unapproved vehicles from entering the area. Thank you to our team. Thank you, Public Works, for having that done. And I'll pass on.
Good evening, Anna Kolomusi. The city land is within the North 101 Corridor Specific Plan, and it's zoned visitor serving commercial. The specific plan states that visitor serving commercial zone is intended to provide for commercial activities that serve the needs of persons visiting the city for recreation and business. The site is also located in some overlay zones. It's the Special Study Overlay, Scenic Visual Corridor, Hillside Inland Bluff, as well as the Coastal Overlay Zone. The site is located within what's called the Coastal Commission Appeal Jurisdiction. And some known restrictions and easements for the site include the presence of a hillside inland bluff, steep slopes, a 100-foot buffer from the Bataquitos Lagoon, and a vista point. The San Diego Association of Governments, SANDAG, has started a double-track railroad project on the adjacent property to the east. That project is expected to last approximately 4 years. This table is a very pared down list of the uses permitted within the visitor serving commercial zone. You'll see the use listed, and then in the second column, it indicates which ones are permitted by right. Then the third column, which one would require a major use permit, and then the two other ones that would require an agricultural permit.
The photos from earlier, kind of up close, the Sandag Double Track Railroad Project. Current access is directly off La Costa Avenue. And if you've been out there, you see this. And then staff recommends that the City Council provide direction to the Park and Recreation Commission to update their work plan to include the goal of recommending a name and possible future uses for the city land located at the northeast corner of Highway 101 and La Costa Avenue. This concludes our presentation, and staff are available for questions.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that presentation. One of the main reasons we're here is because there has been a little bit of a challenge in deciding what to refer to this particular property as. Surfers Point was essentially a trademark of the private property owner that sold us the land, and he requested that we quit calling it Surfers Point. In the days of my youth, it was known as Hippie Hill, but some people felt that if we started calling it Hippie Hill, it would attract hippies, and people don't want hippies to be there. So there have been suggestions that it should be called Ponto Point, which ironically means Ponto Ponto, because Ponto means point. So those were some of the reasons why I thought it would be good to formally kick off the process of naming the land, naming the park. And the other issue that I think is important is that we also engage with the Native American community, because for millennia they have made this particular area part of their lives. And so I'm going to read a Kumeyaay land acknowledgement here and try and incorporate the Payumkawishum, who are commonly referred to as Lusueño, but this is the more appropriate term. So acknowledging that we stand upon a land that carries the footsteps of millennia of Kumeyaay and Payumkawishum people. They are a people whose traditional lifeways intertwine with a worldview of earth and sky in a community of living beings. This land is part of a relationship that has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced the Kumeyaay and Payumkawishum people to the present day. It is part of a worldview founded in the harmony of the cycles of the sky and balance in the forces of life. For the Kumeyaay and Payumkawishum, red and black, maybe not so much the Payu Kuichum, but this is very Kumeyaay, red and black represent the balance of those forces that provide for harmony within our bodies as well as the world around us. So one of the things that I would like to ask as part of this process is that we work towards establishing a name for this park that touches and draws upon that long history with the Native American people. So I wanted to kick off the meeting with that request as a focus, and as we advance this conversation, if my council colleagues could weigh in on that, and perhaps commissioners, if you have any questions or concerns. From there, I think that my questions that are important to be addressed relate to the use of this park that for me should be relatively passive and as low impact as possible. So some of the uses that we see there might mean a greater impact. There would possibly be more parking impacts. But again, I think an ideal use would incorporate some of the millennial history, the history through not the millennials, but millennia. And so that would be my hope that we could head in that direction. So with that, I will ask if my colleagues or commissioners have preliminary questions. I believe we have some public speakers, so we can either hear from the public first or we can take some preliminary questions.
And then Mayor,
Councilmember Lyons.
I know we have some speakers. I'd like to ask a clarifying question. Is that all right? Is that what our city clerk was getting at?
I was just going to mention to the mayor that also the Parks and Rec Commission, they also have a handheld microphone.
Oh,
So
okay.
if they want to speak, they can just hand it back and forth.
Okay, so you do whatever's most comfortable for you, either back and forth or podium, your choice.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear, Mayor, that your thoughts are aligned with mine on this, and I have some things I'd like to share later after I hear what folks say and kind of integrate their thoughts as well. But as far as a clarifying question, staff, Anna, you mentioned some, I would guess we want to call them overlays, so, kind of overlay zones. I don't know if they're all traditional overlays, but I have a few questions about those. So I wonder if you could bring up the map that shows the aerial view of the property, which shows what looks like the white line there. So the white line, let me just ask these questions associated with this map. The white lines where you've got the 100 with the orange, that implies the limits of the property. Can you be more specific for my benefit on which one of these lines are designating the limits of this property?
I'll go first. The white lines are the two parcels, and the black line showing the city boundary. It's on the parcel line going north. So on the going up here and then
Okay.
back across. That's both the parcel line and the city line.
Oh, good, thank you. I didn't see a white line there, so I thought that was confusing for me. So thank you for clarifying. So this parcel is both the area that has the 2,000 on it and also the area that has the 100 on it.
Correct.
Anna, when you were talking about a 100-foot setback from Bataquitos, could you help me understand then where that would be?
Yes, it all occurs on the parcel that says 2,000 with the orange 2,000. And I can't tell you the exact limits, but it typically runs, if you notice the developed kind of disturbed land, it kind of slants a little bit. I don't have I can't use the.
Maybe about there.
Yeah, you can kind of see there's like a pathway that goes across the property. Even beyond that to the north, it would be the 100-foot buffer.
Okay, that's good. Could you go back to the aerial then? Thank you. So it's not the whole of the area shown by the 2,000. It's maybe 2/3 of it would be kind of,
That would be correct.
maybe half. We're trying to scale this in our head, and I am anyway. Sure. But, so maybe it's half of that area there. And what can and can't happen in that setback?
Those areas should be free of any structures or improvements.
I see. Very good. That's it for my questions.
So while you have that picture up, and then maybe you can flip back to the construction, I will add that the situation with the double tracking and the Sandag construction is very impactful. Maybe go back to the one that's got the little more aerial view of that right there. So there's a big conglomerate of construction companies that are involved in the Build NCC Public Works project that involves freeway improvements as well as double tracking of the railroad corridor in as many places as possible. This contract was approved, and it wasn't expected just how quickly they would go to work. And so we were in discussions with NCTD about some of the easements that were possibly, we were negotiating some easements, and where you see the construction, that is on NCTD right away. And what they basically did is they got out the surveyor, brought the surveyors out, and they shot a line right on that property line that you saw on the other map that Dave had up there that was straight down that, and they were going to stay off the private property, but they were going to also build their project and move ahead. This project, unfortunately, is expected to last for 4 years, 4 years. And it involves putting a second track to the west of the existing track and rebuilding the bridge that goes across the lagoon. So they are putting fill dirt in so that they have a land bridge for the tracks, and then they will build a half of a bridge across, put the new tracks in, and then they will shift to the east side to build the second half of the bridge. And so it is going to be an extensive project. And when they pull out of there, there is going to be a lot of restoration that will be done, but ultimately there will be a railroad footprint that is much broader than you see in this picture here. And what we're talking to NCT and Sandag about is the idea of accessing their right-of-way via the midpoint of our property. So where the historic driveway off of La Costa Avenue, commonly known as 101, would be where trucks would enter the site instead of from La Costa Avenue. And they would still likely use the La Costa Avenue entrance, mostly as an exit, but it could be used as an entrance also. But it would, I think, reduce the impacts to traffic if they're using that. And so we're in the middle of those discussions. When we get ready, which hopefully will be fairly quickly, we'll have an agenda item for the full council to consider it. Essentially what we're looking at, based, your questions there, that entryway to the driveway, if you looked at the private development proposal, that was pretty much the limit of activity. There was no additional activity to the north of that. Councilmember Ehlers.
I was just going back to this photo. In my recollection, I was trying to pull it up on my computer, but the 100-foot buffer, the wetlands come below the black line at the top there, just on the left side, like the left half on a little half moon, and it's 100 feet from that wetland boundary. You can kind of see where there are some larger plants in that little half moon. If you measure 100 feet, it comes down near the foot of this. Just to clarify, at least that's my recollection, I think.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Once we get to the point where we are looking at a project on this site, we'd want to have all of those technical studies updated to ensure nothing has moved.
So if you could zoom in there, can you zoom in on kind of that area? You can see that the hatched area is pretty far up the hill. And that driveway that we're talking about, the cross easements with NCTD about, is right there in the drawing. And the purpose of the cross easements for my council colleagues is this notion that we grant them access to the right-of-way across our property, and they will let us have an easement to use their property when they're finished with their work. So it makes the top part of the park a little bit more, a little bigger. So I see no more requests. Do we have any preliminary questions from Parks and Rec commissioners? Go ahead, Brad. Either up there or with the handheld mic.
Yeah, you mentioned the property to the north. Is this working? The property to the north of it, you mentioned that's off limits?
The property north is mostly wetlands, so it's mostly off limits.
Who owns it?
We do.
Okay.
We bought it. We bought it with those limitations as wetlands. So it limits the activity, and I don't know if somebody can define exactly what we can do there. But is there any ability to harvest anything that might be there?
Typically, it's left untouched and preserved in an open space easement.
Okay. So in the end, it's that upper area, and then if we negotiate this cross easement and come to an agreement with NCTD, then it would be the eastern part of that, which is in there right away currently. Okay, ready for public speakers.
All right, we do have 4. Heidi Ledger, Alexis Dyer, Lex Weinstein, and then Layla Ayal Winberg. Sorry if I didn't. So Heidi, you can come on up. And what is your name? Alexis, go. Yeah.
Miyam Jotunum Jamneshkinum, Nutung Helachma Alexis Manoa Diarika, Nokiam Bumtoshaval Bayam Kuichum Pachangiam. Hello, all my relatives. My name is Alexis Manoa Dyer. I'm of the Toshaval clan of the Pachanga Band of Indians in the greater Bayam Kuichum Nation. Noshumpidak Lovik for being here together in Panao, shared homeland of the Kumeyaay and Bayam Kuichum peoples. I'm a local mother, artist, culture bearer, and water woman. Since 1542, our people have been pushed off of our own homelands, enslaved by the missions, and then banished inland to land that settlers thought was uninhabitable. We survived there because we know the water. I would like to request that this 1.4 acres be designated for conservation with cultural access. If co-management occurred, it would be the first time since 1542 that a government entity in Southern California moved to restore the ecosystem's balance. Traditional ecological knowledge is vital to the air, water, plants, animals, and people's survival. Preservation and restoration must happen with the knowledge and care of Payom Kuichum and Kumeyaay nations. In Chamtela Payom Kuichum, our language, this place is called Bana'o. With regards to naming this place, I would like to see City Council collaborate with local tribes to restore Bana'o, the Payom Kuichum name, along with what Kumeyaay leaders deem appropriate. The word Bana'o refers to the local yucca we use in both nations' cultural ways. Bana'o has always been a place of unification, as water brings the biological diversity of all life together. Recently, it has been called Surfers Point or Hippie Hill, and the name Bana'o carries both these meanings, as we are the first Alomaki Kalvuktum, wave riders of these breaks, and hippies are people who desired to return to their ancestors' earth-listening traditions. I would love to see the City Council invite all tribal councils of the Kumeyaay and Payom-Cowichum nations to the site for talks on what the name should be and how we can implement co-management to preserve and restore the balance of this habitat for our children's children's children. Nashunpilek Lovik Aho. Also, I would like to acknowledge all of my relatives in the room from differing nations within the Payom-Cowichum and Kumeyaay Nation. If you could stand up. We have all of these representatives and all the ones out in our way. We go Momiok Pushunuk, so when we pass on from this life, we go to the ocean. And I want to acknowledge those ancestors here beside us and behind us and bringing life to all of us here in all of our relations. Aho.
Heidi?
Hello, everyone. My name is Heidi Ledger. I'm a mother and a local business owner. We sell a variety of gifts at my store. I see a lot of people come through from other places, but as well from Encinitas and the surrounding areas. We constantly have people coming in to look to purchase sage and other indigenous medicines, medicine that once grew on the very land in question, tended by its people, medicine that they have been persecuted for and prevented from using. People want to be in relationship with this land and its native people so badly, but they don't know how to go about it respectfully, and it's a really big problem. We do not know how to appreciate, only appropriate. People need education and real and authentic relationships with the Payom-Cowichum, Kumeyaay, and other native communities. We have the opportunity here to take a small step toward this sort of authenticity and connection and to be a good example for our children and all future stewards of this land. Acknowledging the true name of this land would foster meaningful communication and connection and shine a light on the real history of this region. Acknowledging the truth is always the first step in repair, and it's past time for repair. I ask that this land be co-managed with the Payom-Cowichum and Kumeyaay nations. This land is Pana'o. No matter what you all decide here, we are all on Native land. Thank you.
Lex Weinstein? Yes.
Miyuyam Natun Lela Ayal Wimburi, P. Payam-Cowish Puchangayam Yaka. Hello everyone, my name is Layla Ayal Wimburi. I'm a person of the West from where the water falls in what is now known as Temecula, California. The land already has a name, Pana'o. This is a place of Payam-Cowichum and Kumeyaay shared lands, a place for gathering of not only people, but also plants and more, a place our tribes have protected since time immemorial. It would be commemorating to see local governments work with indigenous people as sovereign nations here in this capacity. This could be a great start to a beautiful and reciprocal relationship between local governments and tribes. This place could potentially be a meeting place for Payam-Cowichum leaders, Kumeyaay leaders, and leaders of local government to meet. To have a place named correctly, it would be necessary to have conversations with both Payam-Cowichum and Kumeyaay tribal leaders, as a name will more than likely be different based on the tribe. As firekeepers of traditional and ancestral knowledge, indigenous people have been forcefully relocated after being pushed out of our tribal homelands like Pana'o and other sacred sites along the coast, all which were once protected by Kumeyaay and Payam-Cowichum people. Although what has been done through colonization and genocide cannot be undone, a page can be turned to a new chapter of communication and reciprocity through a co-management between local governments and tribal governments. Noshin Lovik, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lex Weinstein, and I'm the founder of the Sea and Soil Collective. We are a nonprofit and surf and garden movement, reconnecting and regenerating ecosystems and community. And we recognize that surfing is an indigenous practice. It was a gift from indigenous peoples, and that we are living on stolen land. The fact that I'm an outsider and that I live here and surf this ocean every day, and that Layla lives an hour inland and had to drive from Pechanga today, is deeply upsetting to me on a daily basis. So it's so important that we're having this conversation today about the name of this land, and as Layla said, it has a name. It is Panau. We have an opportunity to heal, to be in collaboration with tribal sovereign nations, and I'm calling for that today in support of my dear friend Alexis, who is a mother and has ancestral ties to this land. And as a water woman and fellow water woman, I want to support her in these 4 points that she mentioned. Number 1, protection of what exists underneath this land, including cultural items and interred peoples. Number 2, restoring native habitat for plants, animals, and pollinator insects with invasive plant removal and native planting initiatives. Number 3, supporting native Kumeyaay and Payom right to gather safely on this land, preserving their culture of water traditions, which are deeply intertwined with these ecosystems. And number 4, giving native sovereign nations the opportunity to collaborate with City Council on restoring the original name of this land. Indigenous peoples only make up 2% of the global population, yet preserve 80% of the biodiversity of our planet. As a founder of an environmental nonprofit, it is very important to me, to our members of our community, that we advocate for land back, for traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous land management. Thank you for listening.
And that concludes public speakers.
Okay, great. And I did notice that some of you had prepared written statements, and I think it would be helpful if you could forward those to the city clerk so that we could include them for the Parks and Rec Commission's use. We also received an email from Rimga Viscanta, who had, I think, some pretty reasonable suggestions and good ideas and resources. So I would ask that be included in the resources that the Parks and Rec Commission uses. So with that, we go to Councilmember Lyons.
So I don't want to, jump in where other people want to talk. So I don't want to be like too overstated here. I know there'll be others who on the commission and on the city council who have some thoughts. But I wanted to thank Alexis for coming so far. I do know that other people who wanted to be here couldn't come because of the 4 o'clock time frame. They had other commitments. So I do look forward to a lot of good public outreach in the future to continue this dialogue. One of the things I want to say is I'm really leaning, and I have been for quite a while, towards this property as the perfect place for us to have a traditional cultural property partnership with the indigenous people who have lived and their ancestors have lived here. So I'm in support of what the speakers are suggesting. But I do want to say that I think it takes time to have a dialogue and to have the public engagement, and maybe it's a little bit different public engagement than we're used to, but to get to broadly advertise to the tribes and to provide a really constructive format for some dialogue and some patience with the dialogue to make sure that there's some comfort from all partners before we move forward with detailing, if we can, what that partnership would be. So I think that the Parks Commission is absolutely the right place to kick that off, and I would look forward to a motion that, and I'll go ahead and make the motion unless I know other people will want to speak, but that we do move this forward to be added to the Parks Commission work plan for working with the public and the tribes for naming and ultimate use for the property. I see that there's some great opportunities for our city to do something really novel and really special, and we're not shy about doing that. We see where there's some good opportunity and good ideas, and we've got the temperament for taking that forward. So I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing and what I hear my colleagues saying and all the public input we've been given. It's really touching to me when I hear Indigenous folks talk about their tie to the land. And I think all of us here in Encinitas, or the majority of us, feel that same way. We are tied to our land, and I think there's really a lot of common ground there. I'd love the opportunity to explore it more. And so the other thing I would like to add is I do see there's some opportunities here too for more traditional city use, and we might consider it more like view sheds, a viewpoint opportunity, small group gatherings, and walking paths, maybe an area for shade when people gather. I would also like to suggest that we don't obligate this land for parking. It's so small. If we can work out something constructive about if people are driving here that we have an agreement they can park somewhere nearby and walk to the park safely, I'd like to suggest that. So that's what I'll suggest at this point. Thank you.
Can you reiterate that suggestion?
That just the last part. So I was talking about more traditional, what we would consider for parks, and in part of talking about that, I would like to not obligate this property for parking. It's such a small piece of land. I think keeping the water to be able to infiltrate, keeping this land usable for people instead of storing cars, it would be the ultimate use.
Yeah, great. I couldn't agree more. And in fact, the private property owner had extensive plans for underground parking. And I have, that not only is that expensive, but it's doing things to the land that I don't think is in anybody's best interest. So for this, I agree completely. Thank you. And Dave, if you could speak for a minute to noticing for this meeting, was there special outreach to the tribal nations?
Yes, I believe, sorry, we keep a list of tribal representation, and that email was sent out to every member that we have.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Blackwell.
Yes, hi. I think I'd like to second the motion made by Councilmember Lyons. So that's first off. I was really interested in what the public speakers had to say, and I really appreciate everything you brought forward. And this isn't the first time, but we have this nice forum today to do that. I also was really struck by, I'll paraphrase a comment Rimga made in her written comment, which was about naming, and that is, there's other places in town we've recognized history, but it's more recent history, right? It's like the Ecke family, and they've been very generous in donating to the city, but we don't have many, or I should say, I'm not sure we have any, where we've recognized Indigenous people, and maybe that is the right time. And this is the right place, Ponto. So I'd like to endorse what Councilmember Lyons said about a good public input process. I'm kind of looking at the Parks and Rec commissioners now to say this would be great for your work plan, is to gather more input and come back to us with a good recommendation for both naming as well as then how we would use it. And I do also support what I heard Joy say about, a view shed, walking paths, and no or very, very limited parking. In fact, if we can park on the NCDD easement, that'd be great. But make sure we're protecting that land. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ehlers?
Yeah, I think what we're here to talk about tonight is the use of the park and the naming of the park, or at least giving direction. And to me, the naming almost has to follow the use. But what I'm hearing is general consensus that we want passive, we want viewpoint, we want many of the same things. I know native planting would be very, very near and dear to my heart. So I almost think like we've almost concluded, or we haven't concluded, but at least it sounds like there's general alignment. So first and foremost, I want to say what I want the park to be used for is more defined by what I didn't want it to be used for, and that was a 2-story timeshare. I couldn't imagine a worse place. So we accomplished that. Other uses, I agree with Councilman Lyons' comment about parking. I don't want to see this turned into an asphalt pad for parking, even though there probably needs to be some parking there for handicap, special use, deliveries, whatever uses in the future. There'd probably be minimal. I'll remind everybody that across the street at the hotel, there is publicly available parking at the same rate and no more than what the state parking down the hill is. So literally right across the crosswalk, there's 100 spaces? I don't know if anybody, it's quite a few. Well, there's that too. Councilman Lyons has pointed to the parking lot on the left there. That's a little further down the hill, but actually in the hotel, underneath the hotel, a certain portion of those parking spaces were set aside for public parking, and they can't charge any more for that parking than the state charges for this parking. That's in the rules of their development. So we could claim that there is a parking lot there for this viewpoint. Let's see, going on, I was going, how do you name things? And how many people remember the vote we had on the naming of Encinitas back in the day? I think there were choices like San Diego, and there was, I don't recall a Native American choice that night or that day. And I'm talking about a public vote. So I just think right now I want to get the use nailed down, then we can figure out the naming. If the use ends up being where we're going, I'm open to this naming. I have no problem with giving it a long-term, and I mean long-term name, see if I can get it correct. Panejo? Is that Panajo? Okay. I'll work on it over time. And then the other thing is timing here. We've got, as Mayor Kranz said, we've got about 4 years before the double tracking gets all done and the trucks are driving up and down there. And I think what we do first, I guess the order I would do this is figure out what joint use agreement we're going to have with NCTD. That'll tell us how we can restore the truckway and make it dual use, if you will, and hopefully, in my mind, plant it with natives. Then from that, we'll be able to also, once we get that agreement in place, we'll be able to figure out the uses, and then we figure out the naming. Now, there's nothing wrong with going forward on having the Parks and Rec Commission come up with a sheet, a menu of choices for the name. That's kind of where I would be looking for. And if you wanted to make a recommendation, I'm okay with that. But the actual decision of what the naming, I would rather put that in order of first we get the joint use agreement, then we get the use decided for the land, and then we figure out the name in that order. So anything else? And I do like the idea of joint stewardship. I think that has, anytime we put native lands in place, and Councilman Lyons and I have been on the Native Plant Ordinance Subcommittee, and we're always looking at how do we take care of this land? And right now we're leveraging San Diego Botanical Gardens on several properties. And I could see this as an opportunity to use a different, and I guess my only question would be what organization, tribe, or how would we set that up contractually? I don't know. That's something we have to look at in the future, but I'd be open to that too. So I think that's really where I am. The order, I want to go through that order. So thank you.
Okay, well, I heard in your comments that you're okay with directing the Parks and Rec Commission to come up with a list of names and make a recommendation, and that's good because I think we should advance a name. It's going to be 4 years likely until we have a park, and so what we call it is important to some people. I didn't have any problem defaulting back to Hippie Hill, but there are some members of the community who objected to that. So that's one of the reasons why I asked that we have this joint meeting to ask the Parks and Rec Commission to do that work. there's no question that we can come up with something that I think addresses the requests that we've made to try and lean towards a Native American name and give this place a formal title, and then everything else will follow. I think that we could either do this by consensus with direction, or we can do a motion. I'm happy to do either way, and I'm happy to hear any comments that the Parks and Rec Commission may have.
And Mayor, there is a motion on the table.
What was the motion?
So the motion was to approve the recommended action, which is to ask the Parks Commission to put on their work plan, establishing a process for coming up with a name and also use for the property. So essentially, my intent was to, let me double check, but there was a recommended action. Here we go. Yeah, it was to say the recommended action. Yeah.
And you don't feel a need to constrain the palette from which they choose?
So I think there's some assistance we can give Parks and Rec, some direction, some more detail. If I was sitting there, Parks and Rec, and you may decide you do have some questions for clarity, but you might be wondering, well, what exactly are you asking us to do? And how are we going to do that? So I think that what we're capturing here today at this meeting is that there's a really solid and meaningful interest in partnering with the indigenous people, the tribes that have been identified by our public speakers, the Kumeyaay, and I'm not sure I'll get the pronunciation right, Homonkawachum.
I was given it phonetically. So
Oh,
that
good.
I do it right.
Okay.
You're welcome to borrow that. but-
I need to borrow that and practice. And maybe the broader tribal community that we would traditionally reach out to, but that we look at the focus of this being a partnership. We'll look at how we can create a partnership with our indigenous communities for managing or stewarding this as a traditional cultural property. And along with that would come a name that would be representative of what this property is to the tribes. So I think that's a little more clarity than just the recommended action. I think that's what you were asking for.
The recommended action plus what you...
Plus that clarity.
Okay, yes, that's what I'm looking for.
And while I did have my priority up for speaking, and while I still have that, I just wanted to maybe further provide some clarity. What I'm hearing us say is that we're interested in environmental stewardship on this property with a joint partnership with tribal representation. I'm hearing that we see this as a property where we want to provide for also cultural access. So that means access by tribes to help co-manage, but also co-use. And I want to be open to that because this property may be large enough to have ceremonies or gatherings, and I don't know that yet. That's just something to be explored. I also see it as an opportunity for education where we learn from each other about traditional cultural properties and the stewardship of the land for conservation and for use. So let me see if I can say that right. I don't see this as just being open space. So when we're talking in terms of what the public talks about, what our citizens would expect, sometimes I think when we say open space, it's kind of like, oh, we just leave it alone and it just does its thing. And sometimes that's another issue. What this I see as is intentionally managed for its value as a traditional cultural property. So whereas native plants are an important aspect of that, I could see us looking into it. Could we work out an agreement where the tribes have access to the property to harvest grass for basket weaving? And I don't know that as I know what I've learned so far, I've done some research. I understand that there's certain management practices for the grass that are important to be able to use it for basket weaving. For one example, not using pesticides on the grass, so that when their practice of basket weaving is to put it in their mouth, and that's an aspect of basket weaving. So that's just an example, but even though this might not look like anything else than open space and traditional open space, it's a little bit different in that we would want to provide access so that it's managed in a way that it can be used as a traditional cultural property for the tribes. And I can see that being either a conservation easement or a MOU. And I think I've heard maybe some other people have other partnership ideas or arrangements that would be a document where everyone says, this is what I'll do and this is what you'll do, and we agree to that, and here it is on paper.
Great, I agree. And Councilman Raylers.
There we go. So yeah, so we're kind of getting into the uses exactly the way I think uses will precede naming. So I like the idea of we should consider if we wanted to, what it would take for native ceremonies there. What kind of parking, for one, what kind of space, natural land, what form, that's something we should get down on paper. I'd like the Parks and Rec Commission to go do that. One thing that I look at, and I was looking around going, hey, what are similar properties? And I look at down at Moonlight, we've got the one little viewpoint park, which is more of a traditional grass park, concrete structure. Really, I don't even know if it's mostly ice plant, I think, and not that much native, right? Native plants. And so it would be different. Then I was looking around, either maybe further down Del Mar, above River's Mouth, there's the one promontory up there. That's pretty much mostly natural, although beaten down with some rope fencing around it, that type of stuff. So the one thing I see that we need to include in the uses here is a viewpoint, because I think that's what most of the people in Encinitas and even every visitor, they'll want to use this as a viewpoint. So we'll need a plan for that too. So if the Parks and Rec Commission is part of, and I think this all fits within the recommended action with the clarity and including the clarity on honoring Native history, is have Parks and Rec look at this, look at the uses. I'd like to see it include viewpoint in addition to potentially or to the native ceremonies, in addition to being able to work out, if we can, an MOU for harvesting grass or whatever, or managing some portion or all of the natural area of the park. I'm not jointly managing it. And then I'd also like Parks and Rec, with staff's help, to look at where people would park, just so we have a parking plan that addresses, can we jointly park with the hotel, with the portion that's dedicated for beach access, or, how many cars do we need to be able to put up there? Can we, I'll say it the way we said it earlier, very limited parking, minimal parking, I'll even go that far, for this area, so that we're not taking it all up in some type of concrete, asphalt, or even pervious surface. So those are my comments. So I think I can support it as long as it doesn't preclude the current recommended action plus the clarity on the native history doesn't preclude it being a generally available vista viewpoint for all the public.
I agree with that. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and I think a good model for the viewpoint is Harbaugh Seaside Trails has the deck that overlooks the lagoon there on the north part of Solana Beach. I could easily see something similar being built here at this location. And I think one of the things that gives us some flexibility on our conversation about the use of this particular land has to do with the fact that there's a state parks parking lot right there, as well as a Lila Maria Hotel. I know that parking lot that you can see in the photograph has a ADA ramp that goes you got to go west and it's a longer walk. Maybe at some point we could figure out a proposal that would include a staircase that would come up and allow people to get to the 101 from the east side of the parking lot. But that's a little longer range. So, but I appreciate the direction for the Parks and Rec Commission to consider that. We do have that motion and a second, so we'll be voting on it. But I do want to make one more request, and it kind of goes to some of what Councilmember Lyons was referring to. And I would like to ask my colleagues that we give direction to Director Knopp to reach out to, I know Alexis and I and Justin Quisquis had a conversation about the celebration of Native American Day on Friday. This is this Friday, but when we started our conversation, it was a little too close to the event. But there's also a Native American Month coming up in November, and maybe there's a way to celebrate that with an event at Pacific View, because one of the things that I would love to be able to do is to bring Native American culture to Pacific View as well, where we have our educational facilities and we have the opportunity to create curriculum that would educate members of not only our community but the region on issues related to both the arts and culture of the Native American tribes. And so I would ask that we have staff work with the tribal council as well as these local residents to see what we can do to arrange an event at Pacific View. It would include a blessing of that facility and kick off a conversation that would look longer term at ways that we could, as a community, better incorporate their culture and their history into our city. So is there, Councilmember Ehlers?
Oh, I just thought the first class could be how to pronounce the Native American names. So, and I think that you'd have 4 or 5 immediate students. So,
Yes.
yeah, at least one. I'll tell you that much, and probably multiple.
So are you okay with that direction then? Yeah. Okay, any objection to that? No?
So
Okay.
that's consensus?
Yep.
Yes.
Parks and Rec Commission have any other questions or comments?
This is Chair Ritter. I just wanted to say that you have a group of some bright, dedicated volunteers that are excited about providing a space for people to come together, our Native tribes and other community members to present their ideas on the park, and I'm confident that we will help you advise on the next steps. So we're excited about the opportunity, and thank you for the explicit and very specific direction.
Yes, and I had confidence in you guys. Good group of people, and that's why I asked to have this joint meeting. So thank you for making the time. And with that, we'll vote.
Motion carries unanimously with Councilmember Hensy absent.
Okay, thank you, and thank you to the public for coming out and speaking to these issues. Appreciate it a lot. This meeting is adjourned. We have another one coming up in an hour.
I know, we have time for dinner.
Season